report which takes in Her Majesty's Naval Base Clyde at Faslane, that although I am and I always will be implacably opposed to nuclear weapons being in Scotland, or indeed anywhere else for that matter, for so long as we remain part of the United Kingdom and the UK Government insists on possession of these weapons of mass destruction, then I put on record my gratitude for the dedication and the professionalism of the Royal Naval Service personnel, the MOD Police, the MOD Guard Service and the civilian workforce at the base. And let me reassure them and the wider community that as Scotland moves towards its independence, that the naval base at Faslane will have a bright future, a bright non-nuclear future, because the SNP has never and will never advocate the closure of Faslane. The strategic location of the Faslane base, which allows speedy access out into... I'll take an interest in a moment. The strategic location of the Faslane base, which allows speedy access out into the North Atlantic, while still being close to the large centres of population in central Scotland, will continue to play a vital role in Scotland's future defence post-independence. I will give way.
I was very curious to hear the honourable gentleman's comments. I was just interested as to what he was planning to put in Faslane if they weren't nuclear submarine. Because they are what creates the employment and the wealth in that area.
Going straight, man. Maybe we should take our act on tour, Secretary of State, because not only will Faslane continue as the main conventional naval base for us, our allies and our friends, but it will also serve as a tri-service headquarters of an independent Scottish armed forces. The plan could not be clearer. The SNP, I will in a moment, the SNP plan could not be clearer that the security of the North Atlantic and the High North is paramount, and we will work with our allies and our friends to improve not just their security, but our own security. I will give way.
Fascinated to hear about the SNP's plans for the future of Faslane. Perhaps you might go a little further and indicate to us how much a future SNP government would want to spend on developing a Scottish Navy.
I mean, it's been laid out time and again. The Scottish Government is absolutely committed to the security of our borders. And I find it astonishing. I find it absolutely astonishing, the patronising tone of the Better Togetherites, who seem to think that somehow Scotland is somehow uniquely in the world incapable of defending itself and its people as part of greater allies. I will give way.
I'm very, very grateful indeed to my honourable friend from Argyll and Bute for giving way, and I must say it's impressive to see the Labour front bench find its voice, given that the front bench speech lasted for 5 minutes and took no interventions. So don't take any lectures from that lot, who have not got a spine a meeting among them.
Indeed, I will take no lectures. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, we all know that the United Kingdom's obsession with being a nuclear power has more to do with politics than it does with defence. Because the UK's so-called independent nuclear deterrent isn't really a military weapon. It is, in fact, a political weapon. And it is as political today as it was in 1946, when Ernest Bevin returned to the United States, having seen the atomic bomb, and enthusiastically declared, "We've got to have this thing over here, whatever it costs, and we've got to have the Union Jack on top of it." I won't give way. And sadly, those words and those sentiments seem to have dictated the thinking not just of the British establishment, but of the Conservatives and, sadly, Labour politicians in this place ever since. Because I will in a moment, let's be absolutely honest about it. Having this so-called independent nuclear deterrent is all about allowing the United Kingdom to perpetuate the myth that it is still a world superpower. And it seems that, judging by the astronomical amounts of money that people in this House are prepared to spend on these weapons, there is no price too high. There is no price that they will not pay in order to propagate that delusion. Eye-watering amounts of public money are being poured into weapons of mass destruction at a time when levels of poverty child poverty at Dickensian levels, and food bank use has never been higher. I will give way.
Thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Does the honourable gentleman agree with me that there is no words to describe the sense of betrayal felt by people who formerly supported the Labour Party, because the leader of the opposition was once the head of CND UK, committed to ridding UK of nuclear weapons, and is now embracing them enthusiastically as the leader of the opposition?
I will let the leader of Her Majesty's opposition speak for himself, but I find it astonishing and something I could never imagine myself suddenly becoming a multilateralist, a unilateralist to a multilateralist. I will in a moment, if I just make a bit of progress. Mr Deputy Speaker, I do find that this whole debate about the UK's desire to be a nuclear power, come what may, and regardless of costs, to have striking similarities to the debate we've been having on Brexit. Yeah. Because in both cases, what we're seeing is a post-imperial power struggling to come to terms with a changing world and finding its place in that new world. And rather than accepting and being part of the new world, it decides to embark on a desperate search for a better yesterday. The result being that it's almost impossible to have a reasoned debate about nuclear weapons, because for so many in this House, possession of nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, has become nothing more than a national virility symbol.
Speaker, and I've always thought this. I do respect people that actually argue on a principle that we should not have nuclear weapons. But that's not what his party is doing. It's actually arguing that we should give up powers, but he wants to be part of the NATO nuclear alliance, where he would actually have to sit on the NATO planning group, accept the nuclear umbrella of the United States and France. So is that not a rather unprincipled position?
No, I thank the honourable gentleman's intervention. No, I don't think it is at all, because last I looked, the last two Secretaries-General of NATO have been Danish and Norwegian, both from non-nuclear members of the NATO alliance. And you know, the logical extension of the honourable gentleman's argument would be that NATO would somehow shun an independent Scotland on the stance we have taken, given the strategic importance of Scotland to the High North and the Arctic. It's inconceivable that NATO would... No, I won't. I'll move on. It's inconceivable that NATO will shun an independent Scotland. But it remains the case, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the astronomical financial commitment required to pay for these weapons and the detrimental effect it's having on the UK's conventional capability is being overlooked. The UK is choosing to pour billions of pounds into having nuclear weapons, and it is akin, I believe, to like a mad dad selling off the family silverware, you know, remortgaging the family home so that he can have the Aston Martin he's always fantasised about, when in actual fact all the family needs is a Ford Mondeo. That's the situation that we're in. Mr Speaker, we're here today to mark the fact that the United Kingdom has had 50 years of continuous at-sea deterrent. 50 years in which the world has changed beyond recognition, and all the old certainties of the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s have moved on. The threats we face today are more complex and far more nuanced than ever they were before. Yet we are being asked to believe that the solution remains the same: a nuclear-armed submarine patrolling the seas 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It is not the case. Mr Speaker, finally, this is one issue on which the Scottish Government, the Scottish Parliament, the SNP, the Labour Party in Scotland, the Greens, the TUC, the Church of Scotland and the Roman Catholic Church are all agreed. We oppose nuclear weapons and having them foisted upon us, because Scotland knows there is absolutely no moral, no economic or military case for the United Kingdom possessing nuclear weapons.
Anne-Marie Trevelyan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a great honour to be able to speak in this debate.